May 31st, 1999.
What you always see is the mentally ill committing violence.
And he just started shooting everybody.
We have a report of gunfire at the U.S. Capitol building.
What you don't see are people successfully coping with their mental illness.
But now we got life, we got society, we have members of our peers.
I would like to see more psychiatric rehabilitation in inpatient. How's it going?
And what you don't see is one man's Herculean efforts to get people suffering from mental illness into treatment and out of the headlines. Tonight, mighty Mo Armstrong, one man's odyssey to care for those whom society has shunned.
From ABC News, this is Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Some stories we carry inside ourselves and never tell. Others take years to rise to the surface, but somehow, someday, they do emerge. This is one of those. My old friend Herb O'Connor, who's done 2 tours as a producer here at Nightline, carried within him for many years the story of his mother's illness. And then, when she lay dying a while back, he shared that story with all of his friends here at work. His mother, it turned out, had suffered from schizophrenia for many years. Herb has some terrifying memories of how that manifested itself, how his mother's inner demons came pouring, tumbling out, how she suffered from it, and the impact that it had on the family. The fact is that 1 in 5 American families has to deal with a severe mental illness over the course of a lifetime. In any given year, an estimated 5 million Americans suffer from an acute episode of mental illness. A lot of you, in other words, will be able to relate to this broadcast in a very personal way. So, while the voice you hear tonight telling you the story of a remarkable man who works with schizophrenics, while that voice is mine, this piece of work was crafted by Herb O'Connor, who, in honor and memory of his mother, has wanted to tell this story for a very long time. Mo Armstrong is a man in perpetual motion.
We have a guy who's missing, and we think he might be in the shelters.
Whether it be searching for a missing person with a mental illness,
I would like to see more psychiatric rehabilitation in inpatient.
buttonholing a key legislator,
I've lost 7 kids to this disease, you know, and now I'm back on track.
to group therapy in Roxbury, Mo quickly gets an earful from people who have been twice cursed with a drug addiction and mental illness. What's called in the mental health field dual diagnosis.
I get out, I go right back to using, you know, and I never realized I had a mental illness.
Speaking with positive people, that helps me a lot with my mental illness and my disease of drug addiction.
And if it's positive people you need, then 55-year-old Mo Armstrong, with his boyish enthusiasm and endless energy, is the ticket. But the first step to recovery is knowing that you have a psychiatric condition.
You know, it's still the most shameful thing almost that a person can say that we are is mentally ill, and I don't know why that is.
I think even if you're a drug addict, you're mentally ill.
Well, I think so too.
Being out there on drugs, I'm telling you, picking up men in the middle of the night, running to somebody's house for $10 to get a hit 3 o'clock in the morning, that's insane.
So we got everybody running around saying, well, just quit using, but they got mental illness, and nobody even tells them what they got, and nobody even tells them what they should be taking to stop the mental illness. So people just go back and they start grabbing for that drug and that alcohol again, you know what I mean?
Take away the pain.
Yeah, take away the pain.
Take away the pain.
And nobody wants to deal with it. I was thought until about 10 years ago, schizophrenia meant you had 2 personalities.
You know, I can hear myself at war, you know, in real war. I said, what the hell?
Yeah, all these sounds and crackling and rustling and whispering and...
Well, hey, at least you wasn't waiting for MC Hammer to come. I I was waiting for MC Hammer to come get me.
No, I wasn't waiting for MC Hammer to come get me.
I was waiting for MC Hammer to come get me and marry me, divorce his wife, and help me get my kids out of foster home. Now that's sad.
Let's do You Are My Sunshine. You are my sunshine.
Mo Armstrong takes the temperature of the hundreds of people in Massachusetts who are suffering from mental illness, such as schizophrenia. Whether it be listening to the horror stories of the past,
but the abuse was bad. They shaved my hair off to the bones, and they whipped me with hangers.
or complaints about certain personnel at a shelter.
Staff neglect their responsibility, and when they make a mistake, they try to blame you for their actions.
On his rounds, Mo sees what most Americans do not see. People with mental illness doing well.
We're part of society. I mean, back, what, 20, 25 years ago, backwoods, you know, sweating it out. But now we got life, we got society, we have members of our peers.
But while progress is evident, the stigma of being mentally ill still cuts deep.
As far as the public's view of mental illness, what you see on networks is the thing, what sells is the woman cuts her husband up and buries him in the basement, you know.
Mo Armstrong goes out of his way to identify with them.
Everybody who I met who's homeless has been mentally ill almost. Even the ones that don't have the diagnosis, they're still mentally ill.
That's right.
They look mentally ill to me. I look in their eyes and they look like me.
Mo Armstrong ends his day teaching students at Boston University by focusing on one particular hardcore case.
People with mental illness get higher than anybody else. All right? Let me give you an example, okay? There is one guy, smoked an ounce of pot every month for like 2 or 3 years. Took hallucinogens, okay, every day for a couple of years. Took 2 to 3 grams of cocaine every day for 4 years, okay? Took magic mushrooms, you know, the psilocybin stuff up in the teeth, you know, getting you really like loaded up in the front of the head, you know, did that while mixing it with the cocaine, okay? And intermittently was drunk, famous for drinking a quart of Jack Daniels in a half hour and passing out in vomit. That was me, folks.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Nortel.
For most Americans, this is the face of schizophrenia. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, killed 3 and maimed 23 others. Russell Weston killed 2 Capitol Hill police officers last July. But this, too, is the face of schizophrenia. James Michael Armstrong, who calls himself Mo.
Even though Mo is, I think, quite extraordinary, the examples that you drew on of people who have committed violent acts are also quite extraordinary.
Tony Zippel is Mo's boss and believes that Mo is an exceptional schizophrenic. That is, most schizophrenics never recover as well as Mo, but then neither do most commit the violence that makes the evening news.
Schizophrenia is a very disabling mental illness that doesn't have anything to do with split personality. It really is a disorder in which the person may well have hallucinations, delusions. You know, they hear things that aren't there. They develop very peculiar ideas, often paranoid ideas.
If in the next few minutes you confuse Mo Armstrong with Forrest Gump, you would be forgiven. He grew up in Keokuk, Iowa, and after a bout with polio, he became an Eagle Scout, an all-conference high school football player. And a champion twister. In 1962, Mo became a Navy medic attached to the Marines' 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion in Vietnam. He was decorated for saving a Marine while under heavy fire. But then the intense stress of combat triggered his schizophrenia.
And I was very terrified because it was like I had lost control. I wasn't able to stop crying. My life had just completely fallen apart.
Moe received an honorable discharge from the Navy, but soon became homeless, abused drugs and alcohol. He lived for years in a small hut in the mountains of New Mexico. Incredibly, he found his way into a successful rock band that had a hit song in Europe. But Moe fell down again, moved to South America, played in yet another band, and nearly died from a cocaine overdose.
The first 10 years, I dipped out and used drugs and alcohol, you know, to kind of drown out this anxiety.
Moe returned to the United States and stayed off drugs and alcohol for good.
This is KALX in Berkeley.
He tried to get into broadcasting, but concluded that most stations were disinterested in a live DJ with a psychiatric condition. He went on to earn 2 bachelor's and 2 master's degrees.
Hey, guys! How's it going? Hey, Willie!
Today, Moe Armstrong is Director of Consumer and Family Relations for the Vinfen Corporation, which runs mental health services for Eastern Massachusetts. He is also a member of the President's Committee for the Employment of People with Disabilities.
Moe sometimes talks about himself as the Forrest Gump of mental health. You know, when you think about the movie or the book Forrest Gump, it's this guy who is a little different, out of the ordinary, who has a disability, who goes through the most amazing series of adventures. You know, every little slice of his life is a new story and a new adventure that all culminates in him being quite an extraordinary person.
In a moment, a conversation with Moe Armstrong. This is Webster House in Brookline, Massachusetts, one of 200 so-called clubhouses across the country where the mentally ill can go for a meal, a game of pool, peer support, and help finding work.
This clubhouse is extremely effective.
What do you do here? I mean, it's a very cheerful place. No, I mean, that's the first thing you notice about it. It really is.
Well, first off, we just try to be regular people with each other. Now, that sounds kind of strange, but, you know, most of us came out of a mental health system that was very, very formal. There were guys in white coats, you know, this whole thing was way too formal. So, you know, now we have folks who are actually spending time in this particular program. But sad to say, and there's not a great outpouring of psychiatrists or people at higher levels of mental health who do spend a lot of time in our clubhouse program. People come here once or twice a year.
Let's take a particular case at the moment. This woman over here, for example. Barbara. Barbara's been talking ever since she sat down.
Right.
You know
and what, Barbara?
Setting you up to see you correct, you're wrong.
What? Barbara, I'm going to be talking about you for a second now, and I don't mean to be rude. And if I say anything that you disagree with, you go right ahead and tell me. Okay?
Barbara probably will.
Yeah. Now, Barbara's, you know, Barbara is sitting over here, and Barbara has been talking, I think, to herself.
Right.
The whole time that we've been talking.
Right.
Everybody else has been sitting brave. What are you doing?
Studying what they haven't, you know, going home what they haven't.
But, you know, the reality is that Barbara and many of the Barbaras would be on the streets of America without a home and without a place to live and without a place to go to if we didn't have this. And here, I can guarantee you that everybody's life has improved dramatically. Has everybody's life improved here dramatically since you come to this clubhouse?
Yeah.
So I mean, the question...
No, Mo, I was asking, you know, I was asking a different kind of question.
Yeah.
The question I was asking is, all right, if I run into someone who is doing what Barbara is doing, how do I...
See what I am?
How do I respond?
You did it.
Okay.
You might be giving classes to psychiatrists coming up yourself.
Now, wait.
You treated Barbara just like another human being.
Okay. Now, Barbara, I don't know what this means. It says movie star radio woman. Is that you?
Yeah. I'm a movie star radio woman.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
On the air and on the radio.
Uh-huh.
Well, then we're in the same business. Explain to me the difference here between someone who just has an unusually deep level of depression and someone who is psychotic.
In my case with schizophrenia, hear stuff, see stuff, or think stuff. So there's times that I hear these things, you know, which aren't there. This kind of rushing sound that kind of starts in a whoosh and then builds up from that.
You know, well over 100 years ago, Thoreau once said most men, meaning most human beings, lead lives of quiet desperation. Is the only difference between most people and those who are mentally ill the quiet part? In other words, most people are able to keep their desperation in control, and the mentally ill are not?
It seems as though this is a neurobiological brain condition. So there tends to be a brain activation which takes place and causes this desperation to take place. Whereas in the past, I think people felt, well, if I could kind of like go off to the little house by Walden Pond, right, I might get my life together. And that works, and that sometimes doesn't work. But for the vast majority of people, there needs to be some kind of mental health system which is engaging and gets people to the inside. So people do have this desperation. Probably what would be different between mental illness and somebody who was just kind of worried would almost be the intensity. I meet a lot of people who carry on or have some kind of characteristics of mental illness, but it's, I don't know, the old term used to be neurosis or something, you know, but it's pretty mild. I mean, it's not out there hearing stuff whirling around my head and trying to, like, get myself home before I fall apart.
But Mo, you're describing it almost as though it were a purely physical manifestation.
We've never thought about that till recently, but it does seem as though with modern imaging that we're able to pick up more and more and more of this as a brain disorder, which we were never able to do before. I didn't understand that that was the mental illness, and it has to do, I believe, with a biological change that happened in my brain. We've never looked at major mental illness or that kind of over activity within the brain as directed. We've always tried to subdue it or stamp it out rather than coach people to live with mental illness.
Let me make a statement.
Sure.
And see if, to what degree you agree with it or disagree with it. A lot of people who are dangerous and violent are schizophrenics. But most schizophrenics are not dangerous or violent.
That a lot of people who are dangerous there are many people who have schizophrenia, who suffer to such an extent, who never have recognized their own schizophrenia and are not in our mental health programs, that they have exhibited dangerousness. The people who are in our mental health programs today, I'm not so worried about. But, you know, we've had, you know, a couple of high-profile cases of people with schizophrenia.
Ted Kaczynski.
Ted Kaczynski, the guy Weston.
Ross Weston.
Didn't even know what hit him. You know, I mean, they had, you know, every symptom of schizophrenia, you know, the kind of delusional stuff. Remember, I said, hear stuff, see stuff, think stuff. Had the delusional stuff. Never understood it. Never knew what hit them. And their families didn't know what hit them. Their families had never been educated. Their families were completely out of the loop.
But particularly in Kaczynski's case, for example, I mean, he was about as isolated as a man can make himself.
He must have really been struggling to live with a lot of pain. And we did not do a good job of outreach. He is a classic case of outreach failure.
But look, I mean, Mo, when some guy goes off into the mountains or goes off into the woods and builds his own little house and is self-sufficient, it's hard for society to reach out to him when he has clearly put society behind him.
We have, then those are problems that we have. But in the case of major mental illness, it has broken my heart consistently that people who should be in a mental health program and understand their own mental illness are not.
Within the past year, Mo,
you had to be taken off one of your major medications.
A very great medication.
It was causing you what?
Back pain.
Back pain.
I have serious back pain.
And without that medication, you had a relapse, right?
My life became where I was totally disassociated, you know, because when I start seeing stuff, and not that I'm seeing that with you right now, Ted, but there's this luminescence that kind of takes place in people's faces and kind of a weird kind of magnification, and I feel like I'm kind of out of my body.
Taking the Benadryl and the GABA.
Mo Armstrong found a way out. He carefully chose over-the-counter medications and combined them with a strict regimen of sleep and meditation.
The hope is that someday we would actually be able to go out and talk more and more about our own struggles. Think how many years I had to hide that in my own life. Think how my own mother and father never understood that. You know, think how ashamed they were for all those years. And that's a lot of burden. I sometimes think that it's harder, you know, to live with the misunderstandings and the prejudices of society than it has been to even live with the mental illness.
I'll be back with a word about how you can talk to Mo in a moment. Immediately following this broadcast, viewers in the Eastern and Central time zones will be able to join Mo Armstrong in a live online chat. Log on to abcnews.com, part of the Go Network. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you'd like a transcript or video cassette of this or any other edition of Nightline, please dial 1-800-CALL-ABC.
Nightline has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source. abcnews.com, now a part of the Go Network.